Hello, everyone. If there's still anybody out there after 4 days of listening to and participating in what has been a pretty awe-inspiring set of presentations and films and discussions and insightful questions from our delegates. So we're now on the last session, and we've got a pretty stellar range of speakers lined up for you to close us off, but also to help us look ahead and how the international community is addressing some of the challenges of maximising the opportunities that peatland conservation can bring to respond to our global climate and biodiversity emergencies. I'm really, really pleased to introduce our first speaker to you, Dr. Sandeep Sangupta, who's the Global Coordinator for the IUCN's climate change portfolio. I'm sorry we can't take you out on a bog this time, Sandeep. But we're really very grateful for you giving us your time today after probably what has been an extremely exhausting World Conservation Congress in Marseille. So over to you, Sandy.
Great. A lot, Stuart. And I'm really delighted to be participating in today's conference, the last day of the conference. And of course, I have very fond memories of the last time I attended this conference, and this was before COVID. And I remember the time when I was knee-deep in a bog in Northern Ireland, and you had to rescue me. So I have very fond memories of that. And maybe let me just start, first of all, by thanking you and thanking everyone else in the IUCN UK Peatlands program for doing everything that you do. I mean, it's a fantastic organizational unit that you have, and the work that you've done and are doing and highlighting the importance of peatlands is absolutely crucial as far as the larger union is concerned. So what I thought I'd do in the 10 minutes that I have today was not so much talk about peatlands, because I guess all of you have been speaking about precisely that over the last 3 days of the conference, but rather to share what happened in Marseille at the IUCN World Conservation Congress that just concluded last week. As Stuart mentioned, I'm the Global Coordinator for Climate Change at IUCN in the IUCN headquarters based in Switzerland. And one of my responsibilities at the Congress was to be the co-lead for the climate track, both across what happened in the forum section of the Congress, where we had over 1,000, we had several hundred events, and which included over 100 climate-related sessions. And several of these focused on the linkages between wetlands, peatlands, and climate change. Then I was also engaged quite intensively in the Members' Assembly section of the Congress, which followed the forum, where again, climate change and the role of ecosystems in addressing this problem really came up quite prominently. Now, what made the Congress remarkable in several ways was the wide range of participation and organization and involvement of a range of stakeholders, including, our government and government agency and state members across all the different IUCN commissions, across the private sector, across indigenous peoples' organizations, and indeed the whole suite of civil society actors ranging from NGOs to youth actors. So all in all, we had an incredible Congress. There was a rich discussion on a wide range of issues. And we are really, and the fact that we were able to pull it off in a post-COVID context, made us very satisfied with the outcomes that we were able to achieve. So what were the key messages, if you will, that emerged from the Congress insofar as climate change is concerned? There are about 8 messages, and I'll try to quickly go through them to give you a sense of what happened in Marseille. The first message was that climate change is here and now. It's affecting everyone, humans and biodiversity alike. For example, we saw this through the release of the IUCN Red List update, which highlighted the increasingly apparent effect that climate change is having on endangered species today. We also saw it before the IUCN Congress took place, for example, in the release of the IUCN World Heritage Outlook report, which identified climate change as the #1 threat to natural World Heritage sites across the world. Think, for example, of the Great Barrier Reef in Australia, for example. Number 2, there was much, much greater appreciation at this Congress than ever before that the climate and biodiversity crisis, if you will, are joined at the hip. They are integrated challenges, it was recognized, that need to be tackled in an integrated manner. So just to share a couple of quotes, for example, Nigel Topping, UK's high-level champion, for example, said very clearly that we cannot discuss climate on Monday and nature on Tuesday, and people on Wednesday. All of these three things need to be discussed and tackled in an integrated manner. Likewise, Christine Lagarde, who was the president of the European Central Bank, at the opening welcome ceremony of the Congress, highlighted the fact that climate and biodiversity are really two sides of the same coin. So what does that mean for us? And this was the third message that came out of the Congress, that what this means is there is a need for ambitious and global emission reductions across all sectors of the economy today. As also affirmed by the recent IPCC report that came out just before the Congress, but it also stated that it's not only mitigation, that this needs to be accompanied by greater adaptation and also by greater justice. The fourth point that was emphasized during the Congress was that of the increased recognition of the role that nature-based solutions and the fact that they have a central role to play in addressing the climate challenge, both from a mitigation and an adaptation perspective. And the way nature-based solutions were conceptualized were precisely to take into account the role that the restoration, conservation, and sustainable management of all types of ecosystems, be it forests, be it drylands, be it peatlands, be it any other ecosystem, could have in both the natural function that they play in storing and sequestering carbon, but also in helping to build resilience. And in this context in particular, there was strong recognition across a number of the sessions that I attended of the critical role that peatlands have to play in this. The fifth point was that of the increased recognition of the need for greater financing for nature-based solutions. So in a number of the sessions, it was highlighted that nature-based solutions in nature can provide around 30% of the climate solution that is needed, but receives only 3% of climate financing. And therefore, the need to provide greater finance and greater support for the uptake and implementation of nature-based solutions was strongly recognized. The sixth point, and this is an important point that was made, was that nature-based solutions, yes, are important, but these need to happen in the context of the deep decarbonization of the global economy, a point that I also made earlier. And also that nature-based solutions, the implementation of nature-based solutions needs to happen in a responsible manner to avoid, number one, any negative impacts on biodiversity, but also, number two, any negative impacts on indigenous peoples and local communities. So in this context, I think there was a great welcoming, if you will, of the global IUCN standard on nature-based solutions, which can help adjudicate between what is really good nature-based solutions and what isn't. The seventh point was this recognition that tackling the climate and the biodiversity crisis really cannot be left to one actor alone, but rather needs a whole of society approach in which the global conservation community convened through our union, IUCN, at the IUCN Congress could play a vital part. And finally, the seventh point, which was the recognition that the Congress was ending less than 2 months before the start of COP26. We were very honored to have high-level UK government participation in a number of the high-level sessions at the Congress, and which made clear that the UK COP26 presidency, they made it clear that nature and nature-based solutions was one of their thematic priorities for Glasgow. And so the messages coming from the Congress, the need to tackle the biodiversity and climate crisis in an integrated manner, the need for integrating and more strongly and more ambitiously, including nature-based solutions and all of its individual components into the nationally determined contributions that countries are required to put forward on the table in the lead up to Glasgow or in their national adaptation plans, or indeed in their long-term strategies, is something that needs to be done. But equally, I think a key message for Glasgow was also that, yes, this has an important role to play, but therefore needs also adequate financing for it to be done properly. That was in relation to some of the top line messages that came out of the Congress. I think a couple of other points that I'd like to highlight was that our members, ahead of and during the members' assembly, also approved the 2021-2024 IUCN program that will guide the work of the union over the next 4 years. For the first time, the program included a prioritized program area on climate change, which is great because it recognized, again, within it, the specific role of nature-based solutions, both from a mitigation and an adaptation perspective, but also recognized the need to assess and address some of the risks that climate solutions, think, for example, of large-scale renewable energies could have on biodiversity or on indigenous peoples, and the need to take into account those response impacts as well. There were also several resolutions that were adopted by our members of the Congress, including one that called for integrated solutions to addressing the climate and biodiversity crisis, and which really called for the urgent protection, conservation, and sustainable management, in particular of biodiversity and carbon-rich ecosystems. And of course, the role that peatlands have to play in this regard was I think, was very clearly evident. Finally, the Congress ended with the Marseille Manifesto that was accepted by acclamation by all our members. And there were three aspects to the Marseille Manifesto. One was to recognize the role that nature could play in addressing the post-pandemic recovery. And here again, an effort was highlighted of the need to direct at least 10% of the post-recovery funding into nature as countries and communities begin to recover from the pandemic. The second part of the Marseille Manifesto highlighted the importance of actually achieving a strong post-2020 global biodiversity framework that the world is aiming to achieve at COP15 under the CBD. And finally, of course, the need to address the climate crisis and the role that, as I said, nature-based solutions could play in this regard. So I think the messages that have come out of the Congress provide a framing not only for COP26 and the UNFCCC COP26 and the CBD COP15, but in a sense, hopefully also send to all of you a message that the recognition that ecosystems and critical ecosystems such as peatlands can play in addressing the biodiversity and climate crisis that we are all commonly facing today, and of the importance that is now being increasingly accorded to it. I'll maybe leave it there, but thank you very much, and really happy to be participating in today's event. Thank you. Over to you, Stuart.
Thanks very much, Sandeep. That was actually, I thought you had been a little bit ambitious when you said you were going to kind of sum up the outputs and outcomes from the World Conservation Congress in less than 10 minutes. But there you go, you did it. So great job, thank you. And, we take our kind of responsibility, I think, as I see it, really, really seriously about operating under the IUCN kind of brand flag. And it's just such I think, an appropriate organization for us to be part of. And I think the work that you've been doing and the whole team have been doing around promotion of nature-based solutions and getting that kind of embedded in, I think, thinking a kind of global decision-making level is just kind of so important for us. And it's really kind of helped, I think, in our understanding and relationship with governments and decision-making here to kind of get peatlands on the map and recognized for the values that they contribute. So thanks very much, Sandeep, and we wish you well, and hopefully we'll see you at our next conference. I've got pleasure now to introduce Tobias Salathe from the Ramsar Convention, and Tobias is going to be giving us a presentation on the work of Ramsar and peatlands, and I think in particular is going to highlight some of the work that we're doing recently on restoration guidelines.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for having invited me to this conference to briefly summarize you what the Convention on Wetlands is doing for peatlands and how we can, together with many partners, maybe develop soon a global peatland outlook towards a road to recovery. More than half of all wetlands have peat soils, not only the commonly referred to Myers fens and bogs, but also tundra, blanket bogs, baramos, swamp forests, mangroves, salt and tidal marshes, and seagrass beds are accumulating peat soils. Therefore, the Convention on Wetlands is focusing since the turn of the century on peatlands specifically, and has since 2002 adopted a comprehensive program for each of the countries who signed the convention, 171 to date, how they can contribute for global action for peatlands. That program is still ongoing, and each party is encouraged to implement it at national scale. In 2015, the earlier view on peatlands was renewed and integrated and clarified the implications of a peatlands policy for the convention under the title of Peatlands, Climate Change and Wise Use. So the climate change is since then very much in focus, and the sustainable use or wise use. Countries are supposed to map and inventorize their peatlands nationally, to limit peatland drainage, and to designate peatland Ramsar sites. And the Ramsar scientific and technical experts on its review panel are asked since 2015 to develop practical methods and guidance how to re-wet and restore peatlands. At the latest COP in 2018, the parties clarified two main priorities. The first one is the one on designating more peatlands as Ramsar sites, as wetlands of international importance, for their carbon sequestration capacities in the context of global climate change. Countries have now detailed guidance how to do that, and I'm sure that a number of British peatlands are designated and do fulfill those targets. Maybe more could be designated with climate change, with carbon sequestrations in mind. In other countries, many more could be done so. The other focus, which was clarified in 2018, is the need for restoration of degraded peatlands for three main reasons: the climate change adaptation by reducing disasters like floods and droughts, for climate change mitigation by reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and for biodiversity enhancement, specifically that particular biodiversity linked to peatlands on boreal, polar areas, but also in tropical areas, just to name orangutans or other rare species. Again, a full program for countries how to implement this at their national level, how to shift also from drainage-based agriculture to paludiculture, wet agriculture, and how to engage with other partners, for instance, in the Global Peatlands Initiative that was launched at the Marrakesh COP in 2016, with Ramsar being one of the launch partners. The right challenge we have now, and that is a challenge where science still should provide better data, better and clearer messages to report to the layman, is to clarify the burden of degraded peatlands. Degraded peatlands are responsible for 4 amounts of all human-made emissions, and that is much more than would be corresponding to the relatively small land surface they cover. So drained peatlands emit much more than any other ecosystem for the same surface. And we can only reach a zero balance of emissions and emission removals if two conditions are reached. First, no more drainage of remaining intact peatlands, and secondly, restoring at least 2/3 of all degraded peatlands. The graphic here shows that the sooner we're doing this, the blue line, the blue curve, the better is the result, because then we can limit the temperature increase at a lower level than if we are waiting, which would be the green curve, or doing nothing. Also, science has to help us to clarify the methane question. Methane emissions can be a peak with restoration, but are soon compensated by CO2 sinks and should therefore not be a concern for restoration activities and programs. Having said that, we will be releasing in a few weeks' time free documents, which are free tools for different type of people, and this will be done well ahead of the COP26 in Glasgow, in time that everybody can get familiar with them. The first product is a global handbook for peatland rewetting and restoration, which clarifies the issue, how to go about analyzing the problems you want to solve with rewetting, with restoration, how to set the goals and how to be concrete, how to get the optimal water table to get minimal greenhouse gas emissions, how to re-establish peat forming vegetation, and how to make generally the public more aware about those technical solutions which are at our arm's length and can be implemented. This handbook is complemented by a practical guide for the practitioners, those people who go into the peatland with their Wellington boots, which shows them very practically how to reduce water leakages, how to manage the vegetation by either planting or removing trees or shrubs which should not be there, how to remove excess nutrients, and where to find more detailed practical guidance for specific regions like boreal, like tropical peatlands, etc. And the third document, which we are going to publish in a few weeks' time, is a policy brief, which clearly shows that restoring drained peatlands is key to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Agreement target of keeping the global warming below 2 degrees centigrades. So no more ploughing and tree plantations on peatlands, because drained peatlands cause more environmental damage than any other ecosystem on equal surface. Therefore, peatlands need to be included into climate change mitigation pathways, or in other words, into nationally determined contributions, NDCs, which the countries should submit with increasing ambitions every 5 years. To reach those Paris Agreement targets by the year 2050, we need to re-wet 20,000 square kilometers or 2 million hectares of peatlands each year across the globe. This is quite an ambitious target if we want to be in time by 2050. Therefore, the sooner re-wetting is implemented, the better for the climate and for us as well. So that was, in a nutshell, what I could tell you and summarize you what the Convention on Wetlands is up to. I hope that was interesting for you and wish you an excellent continuation of your meeting, and thank you for your attention.
That was a really, really clear, I think, kind of explanation of high-level messages there from Tobias, and I'm sure we're all going to be looking out for the Ramsar publications when they come out in a few weeks' time. I think a large part of our audience here in the UK is kind of very familiar with restoration and restoration guidelines and guidance, and we're kind of very blessed, I think, with the level of skill and practitioner community that we have in this country, but kind of conscious that maybe doesn't appear everywhere in the world. So I think these publications are going to be extremely helpful. Okay, it's going to introduce our next speaker now, which is Hans Schutten, and Hans is from Wetlands International. I've been speaking to Hans on a weekly basis for the last few weeks as we've been working together with others on the development of a Peatlands pavilion, which you're all familiar now with for COP26. What I wasn't familiar with was the fact that Hans actually just lives down the road from me. Having had these conversations, I was just kind of assuming he was kind of somewhere else, but literally he's just down the road. And Hans was very kind in providing the soundtrack via his daughter anyway, for the Dawn Chorus from Flanders Moss, which is kind of running underneath the Peatlands Pavilion. So anyway, I will hand over to Hans.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are. I'm Hans Schutten. I'm the Program Head Climate Smart Land Use for Wetlands International, and I lead on our global peatland program. In the next 10 minutes, I want to talk to you about sustainable peatland management, that it can be lucrative, innovative, and achievable. So why are we talking about sustainable peatland management? A recent Ramsar report has shown that 50 million hectares globally of peatland have been drained. And they are emitting so much carbon that to be able to make a Paris Agreement and to curb climate change, we need to restore them by 2050. Let's bring this back to Scotland. Peat soils contain about 140 years worth of emissions of Scotland. The 1.7 million hectares of peat soils in Scotland, 80% of that is been damaged in a recent assessment. Scottish Government last year announced that 250,000 hectares of peatlands need to be restored by 2030. So there is a real need for sustainable peatland management, but it can't be done alone by government aid, and it needs to be integrated with the community, and it needs to be lucrative, so it's got a long-term sustainable way of doing it and longevity in that. So what do I mean by that, by lucrative, innovative and achievable? Let's grab another example. Let's jump to the States. Ocean spray started in 1930. Started in 1930 as a small group of farmers growing cranberries. That cranberry juice is now grown globally, and there are now 700 member growers growing the cranberries to go in the ocean spray juice. The group has got an annual revenue of about 2 billion in 2020. So growing cranberries on peatlands with high water tables, keeping the carbon in the soil and keeping a decent biodiversity is making real big money. So there is real good money to be made of growing cranberries on peatlands. Let's grab another example a bit closer by. On the right, you see the lovely midge. We all know and we all love our midge, and especially people that have been to Scotland and to our bogs know that on a nice, calm, wind-still summer's evening, you can't hardly sit around the peat bogs because you get stung by the midges. And they not only sting you, but they come by the thousands, and they crawl and creep under your hair. I've had it myself, and it's absolutely horrible. Actually, if you go next to the peat bogs or on the peat bogs, there is a plant called bog Merthyl or Miriam Gale, which the extract of the leaves is a natural midge repellent. Even a global pharmaceutical company used, especially when I knew about that about 14 years ago, they used extracts from bog Merthyl to go in their product called Skin So Soft, and it became a midge repellent, and a lot of people use that. I know they've changed the layout and the makeup of their products, but what I'm trying to say here is that bog Merthyl and sustainable growing and management of bog Merthyl from Scottish peat bogs can be a real important ingredient and can make good money into a product. And the Avon Group, as you see here, the Avon Group had an annual turnover on annual worldwide sales in 2019 of $5.6 billion. So this is not small. This is not, but this is real good money. But let's go a little bit back. Why are these things happening? Can it be achievable? Because we all also know that there are many ideas that have got a proof of concept. If they get to a proof of concept stage, then find it really difficult to upscale. Yeah, you might have a small idea, but upscaling becomes really difficult. But let's look at some examples from bottom up, why they were successful. Let's jump across to Indonesia. In Indonesia, over the last 5 years, we've been working with the Good Energies Foundation to develop sustainable business models, bottom-up, community-driven sustainable business models for peatlands that marry high water tables, sustainable produce, and maintenance of carbon and high biodiversity. So we developed and we provided seed funding for small community enterprises to actually develop their business model to market. On the left, you see vegetables being grown at high water tables in peatlands in Indonesia. And on the right, you see purun. Purun is a grass-like or reed grass-like plant that grows in high water tables in Indonesia. It's turned into baskets, it's turned into floor matting, and it's now being sold throughout the country. Interesting about the purun is that it requires high water tables, and the areas where it is grown were under threat of being drained and the produce being lost. So through the work that we did, funded by the Good Energy Foundations and our teams on the ground, we've been in contact with the Indonesian government, and we've been working with the regional government to ensure the areas where the purun grass is grown is protected. So we got protection of the areas where it's grown. That has created a stable supply of the purun grass for the local communities, and therefore an income, and at the same time a sustainable management of the peatland. So bottom-up approaches work. Let's jump back again to Scotland, to a small startup that I came across recently. Saltico is a material science company that makes planet-positive textiles. So what they do is actually actively healing damaged ecosystems through innovative material supply chains. Wow, that says a lot. But what does it actually mean? What they do is grab a feedstock, and either coming from polyculture, conservation farming, or saline farming, and turn that into textiles that are being used in mainstream. One of the products is called Biopuff. And interestingly enough, they are also now using materials from polyculture. So it's not only bottom-up traditional products, such as purun and the vegetables grown, or the cranberries, or the midge repellent that we all knew about, but there is also the textile supply chain. And we all know that especially in the fashion industry has got a huge environmental footprint. So creating textiles that are sustainably grown and sustainably manufactured and harvested from peatlands will provide income and provides long-term sustainable management. So there is a real good opportunities there. So what's actually happening then if we think about these examples that I've just shown? All of them had a strong concept. They're either rooted in tradition, such as the ones in Indonesia, or the berries, or even the one with Avon with the skin so soft, or they were innovative and they've been looking at what kind of products, what we can do with the plants and the species that are grown on peatlands, and how can we do that, and how can we harvest that in a sustainable way. So they all had a strong concept. Then there was seed funding to prove the concept and bring it from and start expanding and developing that concept. In Indonesia, we used the Good Energies Foundation, and there's other examples of that as well. Interestingly enough as well is that our Indonesian example really clearly showed that government needs to be there to facilitate, to help this forward, to put the right framework around it to make sure that it works. Because we strongly believe, and what this all showed, and also what the cranberry juice shown, is that working with farming and farming communities long-term roots the sustainable management of the peatlands in the local communities. So the management and sustainable management of the peatlands far outlives any project that we can fund as governments or as NGOs. Lastly, what is important is blended finance. And we need to, when we go from upscale, from proof of concept to upscale, we need money. And that can come either from the product and from buying into the product, but now as well, and that's really interesting at this moment, can come from carbon financing. And there is a clear on the horizon, biodiversity benefits as well, and biodiversity money coming in. So it is a blended finance of product, carbon, and biodiversity. So what I've shown you over the last 10 minutes, that the sustainable management of peatlands can be lucrative. Think about the cranberries and the avens and skin so soft. It can be innovative. Think about the salty coast, and it can be sustainable. And think about the people in Indonesia. So I think there are huge opportunities here, and I think we can make this work. And I hope that over the rest of this session and the rest of the Peatland conference, you see that it can work and that we can do it together. So let's recover wetlands together.
Sorry, didn't unmute. There you go. Got to do it once a day, haven't you? Anyway, thank you, Hans. And I think we've picked up in there from Sarah that actually that wasn't the presentation that we were expecting from Hans. I think that's probably a repeat of one that we heard earlier on. So Sarah's going to upload the presentation from Hans that we were expecting to show at this point into the conference room. Okay. No problem with presentation for our next speaker, because he's going to be here in the flesh. And if Hans Schutten was the left hand, I'm delighted to introduce the right hand. So this is Hans Joosten. I'm actually going to ask Hans to introduce himself a little bit. He's got so many accolades and hats that I really didn't want to offend him or misrepresent him in any way. Many of you will know Hans as pretty much a foundation stone for peatland conservation, a brilliant mind and an advocate. And the reason that many of us and me, importantly, and important decision makers around the world know about and value peatlands. So over to you, Hans.
Thank you, Stuart. Yeah, you have asked me to introduce myself a little bit. I can do that. I was born at the border of a bog 66 years ago, and my first memory of bogs was when I was 3. So, and since that time, I have been running around in bogs and being active in peatland conservation. So 63 years by now. In 1976, I had my first publication. In 1978, my first book about peatland conservation. Then I founded my first peatland conservation organization. In 1979, I published my first publication on peatland restoration, and I have not stopped since that. And I'm not planning to do that, because I think peatlands are fascinating. I like them, and they are important. I have been asked now to tell a little bit about climate change and peatland accounting. I can do that. I have been active also in the climate convention. I have been 7 years negotiating in the climate convention, so I know the thing from the inside. And also from a scientific point of view, I'm a little bit informed. I have been a long time professor in peatland studies in Griefswald University, and I'm a founding member of the Griefswald Meyer Center, which is an interface between science, policy, and praxis, that brings us together. So I just want to stress the enormous challenges where we are standing in front of. It is clear we have, as one of the most important decisions, I think, in humankind over the last decades, the Paris Agreement. I have followed how it has originated, and I have always admired the achievement that all countries of the world unanimously have decided to limit climate change to 2 degrees compared to pre-industrial times, or better, even 1.5 degrees. That is decided by everybody, and no country has said it doesn't agree. That is important to consider. The IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change, has in 2018 spelled out what this means. It means that we have to reduce net carbon dioxide emissions by 2050 to zero. And with respect to methane and nitrous oxide, we may remain some emissions, but CO2 has to go to zero. And that simply means that all peat oxidation has to stop. And we should not use peat, extracted peat, for whatever purpose anymore. And we should re-wet all drained peatlands. And we should take care that all pristine peatlands that have not been drained yet remain in this condition. So no peatland and peat emissions anymore. What does this mean for countries? We have to do that before 2050. That is the challenge that IPCC puts on our plate. And if we have to believe assessment report 6 that just have been published a few weeks ago, we have to do it even faster. So the challenges are enormous. And we are talking about an enormous extent, 50 million hectares of peatlands worldwide that have to be re-wetted, responsible for something like 2 gigatons of CO2 equivalent of emissions by microbial oxidation and by fires. That is something like 4%, 5% of all anthropogenic emissions of the world. So it is huge. What does that mean for countries? For Germany, it means that we have to re-wet something like 50,000 hectares of peatlands every year. For the UK, you must think about 100,000 hectares of peatland re-wetting every year. For European Union, you talk about 500,000 hectares. For Europe as a totality, we talk about 1 million hectares of peatland re-wetting per year, and for the globe, for the entire world, 2 million hectares per year. That is not easy. That is certainly not easy. And it is clear that this is a societal challenge that we cannot delegate to single citizens or persons. The majority of these peatlands have been drained for agriculture. The big causes of emissions from drained peatlands is agriculture. And that brings us to the issue that these peatlands have not been drained for fun. They have been drained for producing biomass, for producing stuff. And we will need biomass more and more. Because we will get more people, and we have to raise people from the deepest poverty, billions of people, and we have to replace all fossil resources by renewable resources. So we need this biomass. So we have the choice, of course, when we re-wet, will we make new wet wildernesses of it, which is very nice for all kinds of ecosystem services, or do we keep them under production? And that last thing will be a challenge. That is this paludiculture, where also Hans Schutten has been talking about. Wet agriculture, wet forestry, productive wet peatlands. That is the big challenge. And this is a responsibility that is a societal challenge. We see a lot of initiatives that delegate this responsibility to individual farmers. That you say in Germany, that the individual bulldozer driver in the lignite mine has to organize the fading out of coal in society. It is a societal challenge that we have to do. How can we do it? Can we do it? I think it is not a question, can we do it? We must do it. And necessity is the mother of invention. We have good and bad examples of the past where the concerted efforts have made these changes with respect to peatlands. I just want to recall that Finland in the 1970s has drained 300,000 hectares of peatland every year. Why would a country not be able to do the opposite? Of course, you have to organize it. You have to make the narrative. You have to convince the people, but you can do it. And the big example nowadays is, of course, Indonesia. Indonesia had 2 million hectares of peatlands burning in 2015. And the president has said, this has to stop. And he organized a task force directly under the responsibility of the president to take care that these things do not happen again. They had 100,000 dead casualties, 500,000 people in the hospital, 20 billion damage in the country. They had large international complications because they are screwing up the air transport in Malaysia and in Singapore, etc., etc. And they really managed, you don't believe it, in the last 4 years. Indonesia had taken steps to re-wet 4.4 million hectares of peatlands. Not all very well, but who of us can say that everything has been successful? 4.4 million hectares of peatland have been under rewetting activities in the last 4 years. This is a poor country, a developed country, and it can be an example of what the developed countries can and must do. So if you want it, you have to find solutions. What are these solutions? Of course, when we talk about polyculture, we must, of course, acknowledge that these production lines are not in place. We cannot change drain-based agriculture into rewetted agriculture under polyculture because we have the entire production chain, the markets, etc., not organized. We have to do that, and that will take another 10, 15 years to have it really done. And in the meantime, we have to solve this problem, the income of farmers by carbon credits. There is an enormous demand for carbon credits, and every day I read new companies, countries, cities, whatever, who commit to be carbon neutral until 2030 or 2035 or whatever, things that they cannot achieve on their own yet. So they have to use carbon credits. And if we see how the demand is rising, last week the European Union emission trading system broke the level of 60 euros a ton of carbon. If you think that we can reduce emissions from agricultural peatlands in the temperate zone like in England by 30 tons per hectare per year, you see where the possibilities are. But carbon credits will be final. If we believe in the Paris Agreement, there cannot be any carbon trading anymore until after 2050, because then everything has to be zero, and there will not be trade anymore. But in the meantime, we can use that as a method to create opportunity to build up these polyculture chains that have to focus on these aspects of wetland plants that are unique, that do not have to compete with drainage-based mineral soil agriculture. And these potentials are there. These have to do with the structural properties of wetland plants, that has to do with the chemical properties of wetland plants. We can bring on the market products that have a negative income, a negative emission, when we include the peatland rewetting in the products, etc. So these are perspectives that we have. There are solutions, and we have to implement them, and we have to implement them fast. We are running out of time. We have no time to lose. It is clear, and that is the message that I stress already for years, and it has become more and more urgent. Peatlands must be wet. All peatlands must be wet as fast as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Hans. Barnstorming as ever, and just such clarity, in terms of the messages that you're putting across. And I just think every politician around the world should see and listen to what you've just said. I think it's so clear, and the challenge around the scale is a little bit overwhelming, but you've given some examples there of how it can be done and who is doing it. So I think that's really inspirational. Thank you again, Hans. Okay, we're now kind of moving to our last speaker, Dianna Kopansky. So you heard from Dianna actually at the beginning of the conference, and Dianna's going to close it out for us now. And Dianna's going to be just kind of setting out the kind of direction of travel and how we maintain momentum into this UN decade on ecosystem restoration.
Hello, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here with you from Nairobi, Kenya. My name is Dianna Kopansky, and on behalf of the United Nations Environment Programme, I have the honor of leading the Global Peatlands Initiative. It's an international partnership working to protect peatlands as the world's largest terrestrial organic carbon stock. I wanted to congratulate the IUCN UK Peatlands Programme team and their fabulous partners who've done such an incredible job during this conference, working together and sharing your knowledge and experience on the efforts to conserve, restore, and protect peatlands in the UK. This has been an extremely valuable conference full of contributions, insights, and great ideas that more and more people need to hear about and to learn from. Other countries and partners working around the world would really benefit greatly from your refined approaches, lessons, joined up landscape scale efforts, and advances in financing. I really do look forward to doing some matchmaking following this conference and pulling together streams of work and discussions that would help the world get closer to attaining our global goals. Success for the climate, for nature, the planet, and its people on a global scale requires global action. And the Global Peatlands Initiative, since its foundation in 2016, has grown to 45 international partner organizations working closely and directly supporting 4 tropical peatland-rich countries of Indonesia, the Democratic Republic of Congo, the Republic of Congo, and Peru. We're working to improve the conservation, restoration, and sustainable management of their peatlands. But besides these 4 tropical peatland countries, we're working together with stakeholders from around the world, supporting governments, connecting practitioners, scientists, and investors through facilitated South-South and triangular collaboration, where we're forging new partnerships and actions based on the best practice with a sense of togetherness to create both the scale and speed we need to address the nature and climate emergency. We're making progress together as the world signaled the importance of peatlands when all member states adopted a dedicated peatlands resolution for the conservation and sustainable management of peatlands during the 4th United Nations Environment Assembly in March 2019. The resolution builds upon the IUCN and Ramsar resolutions, as well as others, to knit together a solid basis for collaboration across countries to make greater emphasis on the conservation and sustainable management and restoration of peatlands worldwide. The UK is also rich in peatland area. Peatlands are the single biggest terrestrial carbon store in the UK, storing the equivalent of 20 years of all UK CO2 emissions and keeping it locked in the ground, out of the atmosphere, when they are healthy and wet. But the majority of your peatlands have been damaged because of drainage, atmospheric pollution, peat extraction and burning, resulting in an estimated 10 million tons of CO2 released into the atmosphere each year. Building on the commitments of the UNEP resolution and recognizing the need for urgent action, countries have established the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. It's an ideal framework for concerted action by all sectors and all stakeholders. The UN Decade is an international movement to stop, prevent, and reverse the degradation of all ecosystems around the world. This clearly includes conserving the precious nature we have left. The decade focuses on 8 broad categories of ecosystems, which interact to ensure our planet is healthy, and peatlands are recognized as an important ecosystem for action. The Global Peatlands Initiative is leading on the peatlands work under the decade, advocating not only for the restoration, but equally important, their protection. Peatlands restoration efforts are increasingly growing, with thousands of hectares repaired already. Despite the progress made, we need to scale up peatlands restoration and conservation action if we have any hope to fight against the climate and nature emergency. The ongoing work in the UK taking action for peatlands deserves to be recognized and deserves to inspire action around the world. The Global Peatlands Initiative and the Decade websites are perfect platforms for your work to be featured. Joining other restoration implementers and put your initiatives and commitments on the UN Decade online map. We also encourage you to use the hashtag Peatlands Matter and Generation Restoration to help visibility on social media and also help you link up with others. You can also share your project experiences and knowledge in the dedicated Peatlands tab in the UN Decade website and also be featured on the main website page. We are working together and raising our voices with 2 ongoing campaigns and a dedicated research working group, to name a few. Through these latest campaigns, GPI partners are raising awareness on peatlands. This is also helping to facilitate sharing of knowledge and joining up of efforts. The GP3, which is the Global Peat Press Project, the brainchild of Paul Leadbetter at the North Pennines AONB, is a relay race of peatland press releases towards the UNFCCC COP and beyond. Please do reach out with your planned press release and your content to share your assets and join the relay. The second effort is the upcoming GPI and Eurosite social media campaign. We're gathering assets to launch in October, leading up to the COP and beyond. Please do reach out. Share your Peatlands boardwalk photos, your selfies, and testimonials, as well as your Peatlands ask. We've started these efforts in the UK and Europe to plan to take it around the world, to bring together content, people, and activate action on the ground to accelerate peatlands protection and restoration and raise attention with policymakers. We also have an active peatlands research working group that researchers can join in as we work to improve interdisciplinary research, to advance and harmonize peatlands research approaches, and build capacities and strengthen the network by inspiring and facilitating impactful collaboration across the global peatlands research community. That GPI research working group is co-chaired between Mark Reed from Scotland's Royal College and myself, and we really are building a whole momentum to be able to have peatlands researchers be able to elevate their content, elevate their research aims to be more relevant to policy, as well as to join up across sectors and disciplines. Our most anticipated event this year seems to be the Peatlands Pavilion at the UNFCCC COP, organized with IUCN UK Peatlands Programme, Wetlands International, Scotland's Royal College, the Griefswald Centre, UNEP, and the University of East London. The pavilion will be a hub for international peatlands policy, practice, research, and innovation to exchange. Peatlands Pavilion will host a broad range of side events and networking opportunities to stimulate discussion around key thematic areas linked directly to the UNFCCC negotiations. The Peatlands Pavilion will go beyond the UNFCCC COP and also beyond the physical space at the Peatlands Pavilion in Glasgow through this dynamic virtual pavilion generously created by Richard Lindsay at the University of East London. It's going to remain a really special meeting place for all peatlands enthusiasts and Global Peatlands Initiative partners to share their knowledge. I really hope that you've been enjoying and discovering the IUCN UK Peatland Pavilion during this conference. We really want to encourage you to connect with the team and contribute your content to fill out the Global Peatlands Pavilion in time for the UNFCCC COP. Many of us will not be able to travel to the COP in Glasgow, unfortunately, but you will be able to join the discussions through our virtual Peatlands Pavilion. The pavilion will be a long-lasting knowledge hub as well, as all the sessions will be recorded and available for future reference. We're going to use this as an opportunity to coordinate peatlands knowledge from around the globe as a meeting place to come together, discuss peatlands issues relevant to other international conferences and events in the next years, such as the upcoming discussion for the Global Biodiversity Framework. UNEP and the Global Peatlands Initiative are working with the support from Germany and others to elevate peatlands as a priority ecosystem within the relevant multilateral environmental agreements. During the COP, GPI will be joining forces with other MEA secretariats to launch a call to action on peatlands to accelerate the implementation of multiple MEAs. We know the conservation, restoration, and sustainable management of peatlands offers a unique opportunity for countries to work synergistically to advance multiple environmental goals at once. and we will count on you, and we'll need to draw on the knowledge and experience of partners like yourselves and practitioners to support these countries in their efforts to achieve the commitments laid out in these important global goals. Be a part of the solution. Join us, because peatlands matter for nature, for the climate, and to us all. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to a lively and interesting discussion.
Thank you, Dianna. And it's been kind of really amazing and kind of humbling in equal measure, I think, to just see the progress and the impact that the Global Peatland Initiative has had in kind of pulling together our global peatland community. And it's really fabulous, actually, to be a part of it. And thanks to all of our speakers, actually, in this session. It's been a really great session. And I don't plan to kind of keep you very long at all. I'm sure you're all desperate to get away from your screens. And like me, you've probably got other meetings to go to. However, there are just a kind of few things that I did want to say. Diana's just kind of drawn to your attention again, if you haven't already seen it, the virtual Peatlands pavilion there that's in progress and plan for COP26. And Richard's reminded me that it's still there. You can go and see it. Go and check it out through the Film Night tab on the conference platform here. And Richard's also managed to update some of the content in the pavilion, including the Pennine Peat Life video, which is in there now and up and running. Can I also ask you to leave your feedback in the survey, which is available again on the conference menu, and that actually really helps us to improve and shape future events. And I'm sure we will have other events such as this, but ideally outside and physically together rather than just online. And there's also an opportunity there for us actually to gather your thoughts in terms of advocacy messages for COP26. So, not all of us can have the kind of same inspiration and kind of cutting message that Hans shared, but I think we can all kind of contribute our ideas and people like Hans can help to promote them. And really importantly, a few thank yous. Firstly, to our conference partners, Pennine Peat Life and More Life 2020, and Paul and Chris, who we heard from earlier on in the conference, and their teams have been superb partners actually throughout the duration of the conference and the programme. And Paul and Chris have been part of the IUCN Peatland programme since day dot, and they're kind of superb partners in all of that. So thank you, Paul and Chris and your teams. Also thanks to Masterpile for their sponsorship, and Crowdcoms, who have been providing us with the conference platform and all the digital technology which has kind of made this work. We had 89 speakers and chairs across the 4 days, so 19 sessions, and 21 exhibitors actually as well joined us in the networking sessions. So huge amount of people have contributed to this program over the last few days. So thank you to all of you too. And a huge thank you, and literally I just can't thank you enough, Sarah Proctor, who's just done an amazing job in kind of pulling all of this together. But with her team as well there, with Clifton and Renee and Ian and Blue, I'm just so proud of what they're able to achieve with actually quite limited resources. So I think they all deserve a kind of huge vote of our thanks, and it's good to see some clapping going on the chat there. So if I'd got myself together, I could have kind of done a big kind of clap audience audio, but there you go. Anyway, that's the best I can do just now, but you deserve so much more. Thank you. And thanks to you all as well. It's a bit difficult to know, isn't it, when we're in this environment, just how many people are there, how many other people are kind of plugged in. But we had well over 450 delegates actively attending, and over 700 actually registered. And Some people obviously registered and weren't able to attend, but that's because you can all access the content on demand. So everything is there for all of you up until about Christmas, I think. So I know that I will be kind of going back and referencing either some of the things that I wasn't able to see, or going back and being able to kind of take notes and using that in my own communications. So it's a great resource, actually, and thanks to you all for your participation. And I guess this is normally the point where I'd wish you all a safe journey home. So I don't know, wherever you go, into your kitchen or your garden, be careful, but really, really kind of hope that we'll be seeing you on a bog next year or sometime soon. Thanks very much.